Um, this is an interview with Harry Chubb. He was in the 9th Air Force.
Are you on now?
Yeah.
Oh.
Did you volunteer or were you drafted?
I volunteered.
So you had training. What was your training like?
I volunteered in 1942. 1942, I volunteered in the 9th Air Force. And my first place, I went to Miami Beach, Florida for basic training. And after basic training, and it was really hot, that was around Christmas time. And we come north, and I came north to Staten Island, New York. And that was a place where I learned to be an automobile mechanic and fixed the trucks and tanks or whatever fell apart, during war. And after that, I went down to South Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina. And from there, I was doing some more schooling. Then I went to Waycross, Georgia, and I did some more schooling at this point. And then we moved from there to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. And from there in Camp Kilmer, we were processed to go to Europe. And we left on the Queen Elizabeth, which was the largest vessel in the world at that time. And we went to Glasgow, Scotland. That's where we landed. When we were going there, the ship would zigzag back and forth so that the Predators couldn't hit it. After we landed in Glasgow, we went to Colchester, England, was a place where we had further awaiting, whatever action was going to take place. And from Colchester, it was all training and waiting. And then we went to Maidstone, England, which was off of the English Channel. And there is when things begin to get interesting. And insomuch as they had these V2 rockets or buzz bombs, they would send them over. They were a guided missile. And these guided missiles had nobody in them, but I was chosen, all of us, you could shoot at them anything you could to bring them down because they were headed for London. And London was a prime target of the Nazis at that time. And in London, I will say I had some experience. I had to pass to London one time. Excuse me. And when I was in London, I was in several air raids where they blow the sirens and everybody would run down into the subways to get out in case they blow it up. But now getting back to Maidstone, England, this is where these V2 rockets come in. And then fortunately I had a machine gun and I was able to shoot at them. And I shot at them and I actually got one myself. That one went straight down into the ground and dug a hole that you could throw a house in. Nobody hurt. The other one, there was another man and I both shooting at the same time. That went straight up in the air and then it came straight down. Again, I don't think anybody was hurt out of that one. But this is about 3 days before the invasion started, and the Germans were throwing everything at it that they knew. So we're sitting there, and then we started painting our aircraft and our vehicles so that it would show that we were Americans, and like the airplanes had white stripes in the wings. And then there was a big windstorm or something they couldn't invade, so then we had to change the stripes in our wings. And the reason for this was that the Germans would take and know what we were doing, and they would do the same thing, and they could fly in and shoot at our people. So that happened a few days. And of course, in June the 6th, they had the invasion of Normandy. At that time, I was sent. We were waiting impatiently at shooting at buzz bombs, of course, and waiting for us to be called into Southampton, England, where the debarkation point was to go to Normandy and follow up and set up an airstrip for our fighter planes, which was a P-47. When we moved into, it was the 18th, it was 12 days after the invasion, and we went through, and of course we seen bodies floating in the water, and when we went in, as a matter of fact, one guy said to me, said, let's save that guy, we can't save him, he's dead, you know. So our commanding officer said, you do that, you're going to be court-martialed. Your job is to get up over that hill, we need up an airstrip. So we did. We left the bodies float, went up over the hill, and we went in through, and then was the point where we got over the hill, and this was 8 days after the invasion, and about the 9th or 10th day, all of a sudden, we had thousands of airplanes, thousands, English and American, B-17s, B-25, B-26s, all kind of planes, and they flew in over the top of us, and that also had the 82nd Airborne Division, which flew in with them. They were paratroopers, and they did some nasty fighting, which I didn't know about, you know, but at that point, the few days it was around, I don't remember the exact things. I do remember one thing in particular where an ME-109 come in strafing us, and that's machine guns, they had 4 in the wings, and the bullets went right by all of us and never touched any of us. So after that took place, you know, and these airplanes come over, then it was a major drive where the you almost had to drive to keep up with the front lines. They were retreating very fast. And I know at that time I helped get a vehicle that we got from the Germans. It was a Mercedes-Benz touring car. And we used that to go from Saint-Lô, France into Paris. And we went into Paris, and I think I showed you a picture under the Eiffel Tower where a group of my people was in. And after that, we went beyond Paris to a place called Étain, France. At this point, we set up, you know, fixing vehicles and whatever we had to do. And that again was the time of the Battle of the Bulge, you know. And we were sitting in there, and I was in charge of, you know, several people, and I was given magnesium bombs to destroy our vehicles so that the Germans couldn't get them or use them. But unfortunately, it was very foggy, but unfortunately, the Germans never got to us, and the skies opened up nice and blue, and the planes were able to go out. From that point on, the Germans moved back faster than you ever seen anybody. So we could hardly keep up. So went from there to Frankfurt, Germany, with an airport in Frankfurt, and at that time there was another airplane coming over, an ME-109, and us guys used to, well, I had a machine gun, so I was able to shoot at it. So was artillery and everybody, hundreds of people shooting at it, and this guy wanted to surrender. So he circled around the airport, you know, so he could come into land, and he finally get into land, and then all the guys come in there with guns pointing at him and everything, and he come out and he handed his gun over, and then all of a sudden nobody realized what it was, but it was the very first jet airplane of the United States ever seen. So as soon as they seen what it was, they gathered around, and all of us moved back. And about 24 hours, that airplane was shipped back to the United States so we could copy what they did, the jet aircraft. And that proved to be very interesting. From then on, it was just retreating, and like outside, later on in Germany, just south of Berlin a little bit, I seen at least 50,000 prisoners in fields as far as you could look around. And they fed them food and everything, and they were letting them go, you know, to go back to their homes as if the war was basically over at that point. So after that, I moved into, we were ready for discharge, and Japan was still a war in Japan. So what we did, they separated our men in the company, and they said, some of you are going to go to Japan or Philippines, and I was scheduled because I had no deduction. I couldn't go. You know, I had nobody. But a good friend of mine was in there, and he had a child at home, so he had more points to come home. He come home, I'm headed for the Philippines. So we go down through France, from Reims, France, down to Marseille, France. And we're waiting there in the dock, and while we're traveling, it's about 2 days trip. They dropped the first atom bomb. And when that happened, nobody knew what was going on. A couple of days later, they dropped another one, end of the war. So we're sitting down at Marseille, France, ready to either continue on to the Philippines. So they said, well, we gave us money, American money one day and Philippines another, and finally said, well, you're going to go home. Your ship's here. So instead of sending us to the Philippines, they sent us back to Boston, Massachusetts. From Boston, I went to Indiantown Gap, and I was discharged at that point, and never got anywhere other than that. Now, if there's any questions you'd like to ask, you feel free to do so.
What was your trip like?
Pardon?
On the boat, the Elizabeth, what was the trip like?
The Queen Elizabeth was the biggest boat in the world at the time. And I think there was about 8,000 people on it. 8,000. Can you picture a Penn State Gam? They get 100,000.
Wow. Was that relaxing, the trip over? Was that like a break for you on the way back, or?
Well, that was a very, very, very big boat. The boat that I come back on was just a small, they called them a Liberty ship. It was a USS Grant, I think the name of it, and it took us 8 days to come back home. But the Queen Elizabeth only took us 4 to go over.
Did you guys celebrate it all on the way back?
On the way back,
was over,
they had, perhaps you heard of the song Sentimental Journey? They had a band, people had instruments. There were maybe 1,000 of us on the boat. And they played this every day. They played Sentimental Journey. We were coming home.
So how much training did you get before you went into the war?
Training?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had probably 8-10 months of training, learning how to fix automobiles and different things like that.
Did you feel well prepared when you went in, or were you still?
Well, we was prepared quite well when we went in. We had no fear of anything. You got to remember, I'm a 19-year-old kid. You're not afraid of anything now. Just to give you an example, we was first landed into France. They needed a couple of volunteers on a sniper that was in the woods right close to our bivouac or camp area. So they said, does anybody do hunting or anything? Yeah, me and another fellow, one of my buddies, we like to hunt. So we went out and said, well, you want to volunteer to go get them? I said, sure, we're going to volunteer. We never found them, but we volunteered. We weren't afraid.
How did you fill your free time when you were over there?
Well, I've had a few passes. I've had passes into Paris where I went for, 3-4 days. I've had Paris in London. I went to London a few days, and even in Prague, Czechoslovakia, I went on a pass one time for a couple of days. You go to dances and eat and drink and carry on,
Did you keep any diary or a journal at all?
No, I never kept any diary of anything. Wished I had it.
Did you write any letters home?
Pardon?
Did you write any letters to your family?
Oh,
or
yeah,
friends?
yeah. About once every couple of weeks,
Did they write you back often, or?
Yeah. But I know one time I come into a big pile of guns that was piled up in a pile. I was in the ordnance, therefore you could ship guns home, my commanding officer, would sign anything for us to do things. And I sent about 30 swords and bayonets and 2 guns home. And I remember very clearly, it cost me 70 cents postage. I thought, crap on that, I don't need that, that's too expensive. Now I wish I'd sent them all home.
Yeah.
Because the swords and bayonets are real collector's items.
Did you have any other family members that were in war?
I had a brother that was in. I had 2 brothers that were in. One of them was in Japanese over in that area, and the other one was come in after the war, and he went to Europe too. But it was after all everything was gone.
So did they come home the same time you did, or?
No, they come home at different times.
So how did you feel when you had all the family back? And
well, great, naturally. I come home and I had the wife you're seeing here. Well, dated her a few times, married her, and we're married for 57 years.
I understand that you guys actually got the house through victory bonds.
The what?
I find it very interesting you guys got your house through victory bonds.
Oh yes, our home that we have right here now, she bought victory bonds, during the war, and the payments that we made on the house there, we had enough to pay it down.
Out of all the foods you ate over there, what would you have to say was your favorite or least favorite? Of food, like that
of foods?
Yeah.
My favorite was bacon that used to come in a can. We used to do it. And my least favorite, I think, was turnips and carrots and cabbage. We went without eating for about 3 days one time. We found a place in Germany that had this stuff in the ground, and we cooked them in one of these helmets like you wear over your head. We boiled them in there. Best meal I ever had in my life, but still my least favorite.
So how long were you away from home at a time?
I was in the service probably 3.5 years or so. And when I come home, it was 1946.
Wow. Were you surprised to see what your town was like, or was it the same?
I wasn't surprised at seeing when I come home.
Excited? Or?
Excited and everything else. And I got my job back where I worked before I went into the service. And, of course, I spent my life at that job after.
What job was that?
I worked at the Brubaker Tool Corporation.
Down here along the river? Wow.
I started as a machine operator, and the last 27 years I was manufacturing of engineering. So I worked up the ranks.
You went to college at Oxford, wasn't it?
What?
Did you not go to college at Oxford over in England?
No.
For driving the vehicles underwater?
I drove vehicles. They drive on the opposite side of the road over there.
The underwater?
Here we drive on the right, there they drive on the left.
No, like the underwater vehicles that you went in to train.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What college did you go to learn how to do that?
I don't really know.
Oh. Was it interesting for you to learn how to drive underwater, or?
That was when I went to, I'm a graduate of Oxford University in England, you know that. I think I told you before. But my job was to learn how to take vehicles and drive underwater. And I was sent from my company, being a sergeant, I was sent to this waterproofing school, they called it, to waterproof a vehicle so you could drive underwater. And that was very interesting because it was a RAF, or Royal Air Force place that we were at. And I remember particularly that I went into Blackpool, England one time to a dance. And I was only there for about 8 days. and I never seen anything as elaborate as what that was, where these people danced.
Mhm.
They did the waltz, and it seemed like everybody moved same direction, same time.
Wow. Did you see any of the British Allied soldiers or anything?
The what?
The other Allied soldiers that were un-American?
Not at school.
Mm. Are there any other experiences that you'll never forget that you had?
Oh, I like to forget it all, but that's not true. Yeah, I can't think of anything in particular except some of the prisoners. You know, the way they kept them. But other than that, I don't mind. I think it's kind of a wonderful idea that you people decide to kind of get a little first-hand information on whatever it was, because, as you know, presently there's 1,200 dying every day from World War II, and they'd be from probably 79 years old on up, whatever they are. I did notice in the paper they put a flag every time, so I looked to see how many flags there is. But no regrets. Overseas. That's before I went over. Here's over in Paris, a couple of my buddies.
Okay, go to this one. This one here.
I did.
This is when I was ready to come home.
Where did you say this picture was at?
Here's another one. Boy, they must have been popular.
Was this one in Paris?
Paris, yeah. Rainbow Corner. That was a Rainbow Corner in Paris.
And which one are you?
That was in England, where we were shooting the buzz bombs. I had a little furlough a day in the Maidstone, England.
Okay.
And this is what you get if you served.
This is the one. Zoom out. And that's him in England, and this is the one by the military post office. This is in front of the military post office here, right here.
Yeah, that's in front of the post office.
Is that the day you joined, or and got your
No,
uniform?
I come home in uniform. I come home. That was about 10 months after it was sent. I come home in
Is that
furlough.
in the vehicle I stole? No.
No.
That's a Jeep. That's a Marseille, France.
Jeep.
And what was your patch from?
Pardon?
What was this
That
patch
was
from?
that means that you served in the service.
Wow. If you got him, you can send me that. Okay.
This
Thank
is
you.
his honorable discharge.
That's a picture when I left. I had a
When-
pass into Paris, and I was the only one that had money after that whole gang of people. I was the only one that had money left. The rest of them spent all their money.
Okay.
Staten Island, New York.
So this certifies you as a mechanic?
Pardon?
Is this your certificate to say you're a
Yeah,
mechanic?
that's my certificate.
Wow.
No, I can't even fix it.
And this is his house where Harry lives now that they received by selling war bonds?